Our Methodist tradition came about because John Wesley and companions focused on a ministry of presence. In their time, they took to open air preaching and meeting together in spaces outside of the church building in order to bring and breathe the good news into spaces where people were present. In this session, we're going to work on claiming that for the 21st century, focusing on how we can present and breathe the good news of God's love into digital spaces like Facebook so that the world may know and be transformed by God's grace. My name is Ryan Dunn. I serve as the Minister of Online Engagement for Rethink Church, which is actually a brand of presence of United Methodist Communications. Rethink Church is a portal through which we attempt to communicate with seekers. And seekers, in this case, are individuals who are curious about faith, but they're not really engaged in a church. So my job is to get people who don't care about church to care about church. I'm pretty sure the best way to do this is to share stories of transformation. So I specialize in figuring out digital ways to share stories of the church, bringing people together and changing people's lives. It's really fun, it's challenging, and it's hopeful work because I get to talk about the best of what the church does. And I'm going to encourage you to think about utilizing your influence digitally to share these stories. We're going to move from being information specialists to storytellers in the digital space. Father Greg Boyle said, "It's not surprising that God's greatest wish for us is our greatest wish too, that we become one." That wish is expressed in the church, isn't it? So my job is to share the hopeful stories of the church helping people become one. A little bit more about me. I'm an ordained deacon in the North Carolina Conference. I now serve on extension at United Methodist Communications in Nashville, Tennessee. Prior to this gig, I was in youth and young adult ministry for 15 years, which is like 30 years in other jobs because youth ministers age like dogs. Prior to that time, I worked in digital marketing for United Airlines and in radio production. In my current role at UMCOM, I oversee the Rethink Church social media accounts. I troll the internet for the sake of Christ, and I write for umc.org, and I produce a couple podcasts, and I produce social media videos. Well, the pandemic of 2020 and 2021, kind of question mark there, heightened an awareness to the trend that the content many of us create for religious communities no longer seems to have the impact it once did. So like pre-pandemic, most ministries enjoyed a well-established platform, and in our case, that platform was often the pulpit on Sunday morning worship. So each week we created a valuable piece of content, and then we happily delivered that content to our target audience who sat in the pews before us, right? But now our audience is no longer in the pews. The Barna Group found that even when COVID-related restrictions end, only 41% of church-engaged Gen Z members plan on returning to regular attendance of in-person worship. And only 42% of millennials say they prefer in-person worship. It's important to note that these stats only reflect those who already claim to be part of our churches. They don't touch on people who are not currently engaged in faith communities. So people, especially younger people, seek to engage in faith communities in ways outside of what we're used to, in ways outside of in-person worship. It's becoming less and less likely we'll see as many people return to the pews as we were accustomed to seeing pre-pandemic, right? The younger, digitally native generations already had a built-in resistance to our kind of standardized form of content delivery, which was the pulpit, and now are finding the world bending to their preferred modes of consumption. They're multimedia consumers who find value in just little snippets of information. And our content delivery method of speaking from a podium for 20 minutes or more, it feels a little foreign to them. In our world today, we're discovering new ways to be present with one another. In younger generations, virtual and digital presence, that counts as much as actual presence. It's foreign to somebody of my age, but relationships are formed in digital space. So for example, I have a 13-year-old son who counts other teens who he's only met through online games as friends. That's foreign to me as a 45-year-old, but it's native to him. He experiences real presence in digital space. And our call in this new world then revolves around making our world-rocking message present in digital spaces. In the Christian tradition, we believe that the message is most effectively delivered when it puts on flesh, right? That sounds counter to presenting a message in digital space, but in a world where the boundaries between digital and corporal are blurred, we are invited to consider how we begin to digitally embody the word. How does our digital presence embody God's world-changing message? That's the big invitation for those of us in ministry. We know where the people are. The invitation is for us to consider how we're utilizing these digital spaces to connect with people and share our world-rocking messages with them. Have we made the digital space our third space? In order to meet people online, we probably need to understand why people engage in digital spaces. For the most part, we don't get online for the most altruistic reasons. Actually, we get online, it's most often to indulge some pretty selfish desires. Generally, we dive into social media or web surfing because we want to learn something either about ourselves or we want to learn something for ourselves. Or B, we want someone else to know something about us. And I'm not different. If you were to troll my social media feeds, you'd see I'm pretty into sharing things about myself. The music I'm listening to, how my pets spend the day, my grocery list. I'm not sure what I was up to that day. Or even that my teenager thinks I'm the world's best dad, which you can bet I'm pretty darn proud of. Fellow United Methodist social media trainer Dan Wunderlich, he told me that when it comes to online content, we're really attracted to stuff that makes us out to be the hero, or in the least, messages that send us on the hero's path. So I don't mind reading an online article that isn't about me so long as I perceive that the information it's providing me is sending me down the hero's path. On some level, there's some kind of selfish ambition within that holds an assumption that consuming online media is going to make me the hero. They used to say that you could tell what's important to a person by what they had hanging on their walls, right? Do you think that is true for you? If someone walked through your home today, could they tell what you value or what your interests are? If we carried that idea over to our social media walls, we'd likely see that a lot of us value ourselves. And that's not universally true. It's only mostly true, right? Now, we can use this idea as a jumping off point for how we engage in digital ministry. We know that people are looking to learn something about themselves or for themselves. And we also know that they are accustomed to seeing everybody else sharing something of themselves. When you combine those factors, we see that many people are turning to social media and digital platforms just to reinforce that they are not alone in the world. And this presents the second thing people are looking for online, which is to connect with real people. So we've seen that online users want to engage with content that tells them about themselves, and they want to connect with other human beings. And that can be a challenge for those of us who are communicating on behalf of institutions. For me, that's the Rethink Church brand. For you, it's likely your church or ministry. The challenge then moves us to question how we're conveying the information we hope to communicate through the digital reflections of real people. To me, this drives us towards some traditional practices that we know well as Christians. And one is to share testimony as much as possible. And in this case, I don't necessarily mean constantly sharing a come to Jesus moment and a call for repentance, although there are definitely times to do that. Instead, in this case, though, I mean offering a platform for stories of impact. Allow people to share their stories because, again, we're jumping online to be reassured that we aren't alone. The other traditional practice is a lot like stained glass windows. Before everyone could read, stained glass helped portray the stories of the faith. And now churches that utilize stained glass windows, they use them to convey what's important to their community, don't they? The stained glass windows portray important events in our faith tradition. And knowing this crowd, I'll bet that you can look at this window and without any context, you can tell the who and what of this particular scene, right? Many of us have windows just like this in our church facilities. They used to say that you could tell what's important, again, about looking at people's walls. Well, today we call our Facebook representations profiles instead of walls, but people still view our profiles much like they view the walls in our homes or the windows in our church buildings. They're checking them out to see what's important to us. So we're going to use these digital spaces to communicate our shared community values. And as much as possible, we want to share real stories of our people enacting or talking about those values. What we're doing then is creating a brand for our community. In the marketing world, we use the term branding as a way of referring to our values, vision, and perception. Now, branding sounds corporate and markety, but it's simply a way to focus our messages. We want to stay, quote unquote, on brand, which is just a shortcut way of saying that we want to make sure our messages and content reflect the values and mission of our ministries. So let's get practical. What does this content actually look like? The short answer is this. It can look like nearly anything so long as it meets a few criteria. First, that it's on brand. Second, that it provides access to a human being. And thirdly, that it speaks to your audience. For this third criteria, it's really helpful to have a target audience in mind. So know who you are posting for. In the publishing world, they say that a book that's for everyone isn't actually for anybody. Online content works the same way. So I generally build archetypes for who each piece of content is for. I've built several and I've given them names. There's Justin and Angela and Caleb and Pablo, and they're all based on real people who I've interacted with. So for your purposes, it probably makes sense to build your archetypes on actual people in your ministry or congregation. So one archetype might be Michael, who was the first person to register when you started going back to in-person worship. Or another might be Lucy, who attends about once a quarter. She's regularly part of the quilting group, though, but otherwise she tends to stay at the margins. What can you post for her? The archetypes are helpful because they help define content. They can also make sure you're presenting a broad range of content. So I might look at our recent posts at Rethink Church and realize that I haven't done anything that's just for Justin in quite a while, and I might want to address that. I'm going to play a video of a post from my friend Nathan Webb and listen for how he addresses the criteria that we have established.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Checkpoint Church. I'm your nerd pastor, Nathan, and I'm so glad that you are here joining us. Checkpoint Church is the church for nerds, geeks, and gamers, not just for them, but specifically designed with you in mind. We're the church where all people from all walks of life with all backgrounds are always welcome. We are striving to steer clear of being too churchy or using words that might be Christianese or confusing or seeming like we're judging you in any way, shape, or form. That's not what we're about here. We're hoping to be the safe space for people that have never felt welcome to church before. Here at Checkpoint Church, we have 3 rules. The first rule is to do good. That seems pretty self-explanatory. We just want to strive to be people who are doing good. Our second rule is that we want to do no harm. We don't want to hurt other people. We care about you. We care about everyone that comes and joins us. And so it's important to us here at Checkpoint that we all love one another and that we seek not to harm one another. Our third rule is that we strive to grow. Our goal here at Checkpoint is to always be better than we were the day before. We always want to be somebody new working towards something greater. And we're hoping, just maybe, we can do that together. We're not naive enough to think that we're your first stop. We know that you have a past. We know that you have a background, maybe one that you're proud of, maybe one that you're not. We get it. We've been there as well. We also know that as soon as you come to our church or as soon as you join our community for the first time, that you're not going to be some kind of magically changed, perfect person. We're not trying to be heaven, nor are we trying to be the first place for you. We just want to be a checkpoint. We want to be a safe space along the path. We want to be the short rest at the tavern. We want to be the Pokemon Center right before the gym leader boss. We're just striving to be that checkpoint along the path. We hope that you'll join us and be a part of something together, and let this be the place where you can heal, where you can feel safe, where you can feel welcome and comfortable. Currently, we're an experimental church plant in Denver, North Carolina, out of the United Methodist Church. Given that, we don't exactly have like a place that we are. We're not necessarily centered somewhere, but we do have plenty of ways that you can find out more about us. The best way to find us is on any of our social media platforms. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord. Those are the places where I would recommend that you start because they really lay down that foundation of what's going on in Checkpoint Church. You could also check out some of our content creation platforms such as Twitch or YouTube or Anchor.fm where we're creating podcasts. Those are places where we're putting out stuff for you to enjoy and get involved with. Or of course, and obviously, there's always our website, checkpointchurch.com. That's where everything is going to end up eventually anyway. So that would be another great place to just have bookmarked on your bookmark bar. For those of you here on Facebook, consider joining our Facebook group. It's something that is pretty neat that we're trying, that we're doing our best with, and we're certainly having a lot of fun figuring it out. It's a place where we can all feel a little bit more safe, a little bit more private, as it is a closed-off group that somebody has to ask to join. So we can talk about things that maybe weigh us down a little bit or things that are a little bit more challenging. Plus, there's memes. Come on, there's memes. What more do I have to say? Folks, we've got big plans for the future. We're planning trivia nights, we're planning podcasts, we're planning charity drives, we're planning video game giveaways, we're planning deep dives, we're planning more videos and streams and things for you to enjoy and get involved with. We really want you to join here at Checkpoint Church, become a part of something, help us figure out what it is God is calling us to do, and grow to be a better person together. Folks, at the end of the day, we are doing all that we can to let you know without a shadow of a doubt that Jesus absolutely loves you, that we absolutely love you, and that you matter. We're Checkpoint Church. We're here for who God made you to be.
The criteria were met pretty clearly, weren't they? He was clear about the community values, he was human, and he definitely has a specific audience. The other things I love about this video, besides the cool little graphic thing at the beginning, is that this video is really low tech. It's possible he just set up his phone and recorded that thing. There aren't slick edits. He did some jump editing here and there, so maybe he messed up while he was speaking. It happens. He just cut it and went without concern for transition. And that's pretty acceptable now. Now, not all of our content is going to be some kind of explainer video like this. It might not even be a video. I just liked how clearly this met the criteria for a piece of content that connects. And when we're talking about content, we're not always talking about videos or blog posts that need to be generated from scratch. Churches are already content machines. You have content being generated in your community every week, if not every day. For another good content example, I'll offer this video.
One of the things I think about is a conversation that I had with my dad during one of my times of deep grief over the closing of my church in LeSueur. And I shared with him my sadness. And I shared with him my insecurities. What difference am I making anyway? Again, how can I possibly have an impact on a church that has no future? And he said to me something I'll always remember. He said, now I know that at your age especially, you have a lot of questions about, am I successful? Do I matter? Does what I do really count? But in the end, those are not actually the questions that you need to be asking. In the end, the only question that you need to be asking is, am I doing what God wants me to be doing? Because that's enough.
This is obviously an excerpt from a Sunday sermon. It's not the whole thing, it's just part. And it lets people see a church leader, in this case, Pastor Sarah at Vineyard UMC. And I would say she's speaking to a specific audience, in this case, committed followers who are struggling with purpose, which is totally on brand for a church, right? We're pushing and helping people along on their discipleship journeys. And this segment speaks to that. And the Sunday sermon, I'll tell you, that can be a treasure trove of content. So you get a video segment like this. And then you can pull out a quote and it's more content. Pull out your quote from the Sunday sermon. And do you make sermon transcripts available online? That might be a good idea just for accessibility purposes. Or if you make audio recordings of sermons available, then you can tease those, both the transcripts or the audio recordings. You can tease those out on social media. Now, believe it or not, the content generation may actually be the easy part. Sure, it will take a little while to get rolling, but once you find a rhythm, it will come rather easily, I promise. Especially if you really mine the Sunday sermon for content. The toughest part, at least for me, is actually getting the content in front of people. So a platform like Facebook, it's not set up for institutional entities like our churches to reach a lot of people without us investing advertising dollars. So you can create a really awesome piece of content like Pastor Nate or Pastor Sarah, and then only 5 people see it. The problem isn't necessarily the content. The problem might be that the system is made to prioritize or is made to deprioritize your entity. So Facebook, for example, it particularly wants people interacting with people. So that is what we have to lean into. I once attended an evangelism training where the leadership encouraged the participants to assign themselves what they called fishing ponds. And these ponds were spaces where we could just offer presence. For me, the pond became a local coffee shop and bakery. It was my third space, so my home and my office being my primary spaces. And I got to know the staff there. I had a number of impromptu conversations with people there. I met friends of friends there. I spent so much time there that one church member came across and she said, if I didn't know better, I'd say we were paying you to drink coffee here all day. And yeah, kind of right. I purposefully inserted myself into that coffee shop for the purpose of meeting new people and sharing a message of kindness and hope with them. I was there to be a ministerial presence. And I couldn't go to the coffee shop today, even if I could, people wouldn't have the same openness to just stopping and engaging with me in conversation. I hope that that time returns, but it's going to take a while before we're all comfortable doing that. However, people are hanging out in digital spaces more than ever now. They're more ready to engage in conversations in those spaces than ever before. And they're connecting with real people through those spaces more than ever before as well. And it seems that many are going to continue using virtual means to form connections. So here's what hanging out at a fishing pond looks like today. I joined 25 Facebook groups around various topics related to my areas of personal interest. So things like parenting and dad's groups. I'm really interested in podcasting, so I joined a number of those groups. And every day I spend 15 to 30 minutes just interacting in those groups. And here's the key with those groups. I don't post any links in those groups. It's not like I'm dropping in just to say, hey, I posted this great article on umc.org. Here's a link. Instead, I'm interacting just as everyone else interacts. So I'm offering insight where appropriate and support wherever possible. And then on my personal profile, I make sure that my bio is up to date with relevant links and then I'm sharing posts or links from, say, my umc.org or Rethink Church or whatever other entity I'm a part of as part of my social media feed. I'm posting it there. And the bottom line is this: your church's Facebook may have 1,000 followers, and you can post a killer post with the right keywords and meeting the right criteria, and 10 people are going to see it. If you turn around and repost that post on your personal account, well, another 10 people are going to see it, which actually now we're starting to see that this is a pretty good piece of content, right? If you drop a nice response in a Facebook group and people start looking at your profile, 20 more people are going to see it. And do you see the exponential possibilities of how this content starts to get around then? So this is from a podcast that I produced. This represents downloads on that podcast. And you can see most days downloads hovered just above zero, despite my daily posts to my branded social media pages. Then at the end of February, I started doing the daily social engagements. And look what happened there towards the end of February. This actually would look like a huge jump, but then came that one huge spike on March 10th, which just kind of threw the whole thing. And I wish I knew specifically what I did to drive all that traffic on March 10th, because I would do it over and over and over again. But that single day aside, the reach of the content for this period tripled from beginning to end, which is pretty good. I think we'd all take that. We are an incarnational people. To us, presence matters. As Christians, presence matters. It matters that God became present in human history through the person of Jesus, and that represents the biggest event in human history. Our calling is to live that presence of love ourselves, and we live that by walking into a room and offering the love of Christ. Now, the pandemic has certainly challenged the way in which we practice presence with one another. We're not lost, though. We're not without hope. I believe we're at a point when we're being challenged to get creative about how we practice presence. So with that, I'm not sure there's a wrong way to be doing any of this. I think anytime we can show up in a digital spaces that often feel negative for many, anytime we can show up there and offer light and love, then we're doing something pretty positive. So I'll close this presentational time and then we'll get to some question and response stuff. But I want to close this presentation with a thought from the Gospel of Chocolate. In case it's tough to read, that says, your vibe attracts your tribe. And that's particularly true in the digital world. though, if you throw out a positive message, a grace-filled vibe, and you'll find that a tribe that is mostly positive and grace-filled will coalesce around it. So if you want to become a part of my tribe, if I can become a part of yours, here's that contact information. And I'll be happy to answer some questions for you.